Hello there, programmers, and welcome to another episode in our Python tutorials series. Today we're going to be covering a topic that is going to be fairly short, and the reason it's going to be so short is because once you understand the core concept, what we're actually doing, it's incredibly simple to go from understanding basic Python to being able to use this. And of course, what I'm talking about are lambdas, also known as anonymous functions, okay? So I'm going to dive straight in, and as I go, I'm going to kind of explain some of these concepts. But what you really need to know is that these anonymous functions, these lambda functions, are not like they are in other languages. So if you know lambdas from other languages like JavaScript or Java or any of those languages, they add functionality to the language itself. In Python, that's not true. All they are is another form of shorthand for defining functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and import a couple things here so that we can demo how lambdas actually work inside of Python, and then you'll be able to see it's pretty simple. If you know how to define functions, you can use lambdas interchangeably anywhere you want. Okay, so we're going to bring in randint, and then I'm going to show some common use cases here from func_tools. I'm going to import the reduce function, okay? So we can see some basic functional programming. Let's go ahead and set up an array that we're going to work with here. We're going to call this nums. This is all our numbers. And let's do a random integer from 0 to 100. And for underscore in range. And let's do 20 of them, okay? So we're just setting up a random array here. We're going to have a whole bunch of integers in it, and we're going to perform some actions on it. Okay, so the first concept we need to cover. As I said, we can create a function. We're going to check to see if any of the numbers in our number array are even. Okay, so we're going to start is the number even in, and let's call this num. Is even num, and we're going to return num mod 2 is equal to 0. If this is true, then the number is even. If it's false, the number is odd. Okay? Pretty straightforward and simple. So let's go ahead and do our if dunder name equals dunder main. Oh my goodness. Fat fingering across the board. All right. And another space here because I like to make it happy. Let's do... First thing we're going to do, we're going to see if we can get all the evens out of this list. First, actually, let's do this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to print nums. We're going to see what this array looks like. Okay? So let's just run this. Let's see what we've got, what kind of number array we're dealing with. Random numbers, random order. Okay? So now let's grab all the evens. So we're going to say evens equals the list. So we're going to cast what we're getting out of here as a list, and we're going to call the filter. Now you notice here filter has two arguments, underscore function and underscore iterable. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say filter, and we're going to pass in a function. So we're going to pass in is even, and then the iterable itself is the array that we created, so nums. Okay. That's all we need to do to call the filter function and then convert the output, which, if you can see here from our built-ins, this defines filter and it returns an iterator array of type T. Okay, and so we can convert this into a list as we expect it to be. Okay, and then we're going to print all of the evens. So if we run this, you'll be able to see when we run, we get a different array now, and we're only grabbing the even numbers out of there. All the odds have been stripped out. Okay? So far, so good. We're working just like regular Python. So we have a function, we're passing the function itself as an argument into the filter function. Okay? Now, we can simplify this. If you look at this kind of function, you can see def is even, and we pass in a num, and we're returning num mod 2 equals 0. we have a whole bunch of extra cruft here that we don't actually need. We could strip out the name. We're only using this in one place. We could strip out the return and the def and be left with only the argument and the actual method itself. And if we were to do all of that, what we would end up with is a Lambda function. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that, actually. Let's see what it does. So I'm going to replace isEven with a variable. I'm going to say isEven so that we can name it, is equal to, and here's the magic shortcut. We're going to say lambda. That's the keyword that we use here to say we are defining an anonymous function, and we're assigning it into this variable here. Lambda is equal to, and then we say our argument, colon, and then our method, what the actual body of our method, num mod 2 equals 0. Okay, so what we've done here is we've defined a new variable. Okay, we can delete all of this. We don't need this anymore. Okay, and we've defined a new variable isEven. All right. So yeah, so this is throwing a little fit here because it's saying do not assign a lambda expression. Use a def. So it's saying define a function. Don't do this. This is silly. Why would you ever do this? Well, we're doing this because I want you to see that when you run this, you get exactly the same thing that you did as if you were defining a function. Okay, that's because this is a shorthand. It's a way to create an anonymous function so that you don't have to name it. I can actually grab all of this here, and I can take everything that's left on this line. Let's do something fun here. Let's create a parenthesis and paste this all in here. And then I want to pass in an array. Okay. Actually, I want to pass in a number. Let's say 14. Okay, so I'm going to pass in a number. I'm going to put this into parentheses, and then I'm going to call it with another set of parentheses. And then down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this isEven with the lambda itself. Okay? So let's play with this. Let's see what happens here. We're going to see a couple things. And then what I want to do is actually print this. Print the output from this. Sorry. Otherwise you won't see it. It just runs and it works fine. So here we go. So if we print and we have in parentheses the lambda, and then we pass in parenthesis 14 afterwards, we're seeing that this is an even because it's being passed into this lambda function. It's executing, and then it's returning true, and that's the output of it, and that's what we're printing right here. Okay? And down here, you can see all of this has stayed exactly the same as it was before. The difference is we've replaced it with a lambda function. Okay, so let's do a couple more things here just to kind of solidify this in your brain. Lambda functions are nothing but functions without a def block. Okay? And so we can say, let's calculate all the squares. Squares equals the list, and we're going to use the map function this time. Map is a little bit different than filter. So map takes the same arguments, though. It takes a function, so we're going to do lambda, and we're going to pass in our num, and then I'm going to say, let's square everything, okay? Everything to the power of 2. And then we're going to pass in the evens that we got out, okay? So what we've done here is we're using the map function. What map does is it walks over every object in the array that you get, okay? Every item in the array, and it applies whatever the function is here. So it says for every number in the array, we're going to return number squared. So let's print this and see what we get. So if I print the squares, okay, and I run this, now I'm going to get another array. And 22 squared is 484. 88 squared is 7744. 16 squared is 256, right? So we're walking through each item in this array, and we're returning a new array with all of the numbers squared in it, okay? One more. Okay, so I had already brought it in above, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. So we're going to say our final value is equal to reduce. So we don't need to call list. We don't need to wrap this in a list because we're going to reduce everything, the entire array down to a single value. Okay. It takes the same thing. It takes a function. So we're going to say now a lambda function with 2 arguments. We're going to say lambda a and b. And then we're going to say a plus b. And we're going to pass in the squares. And so let's explain this one just a little bit here. I reduce takes in a function with 2 arguments as the first argument. Okay? The reason is because you're starting with your first 2 numbers, and you're performing an action on them. In this case, we're adding them, a plus b. Okay. So I add a plus b, my first 2 items in the array. I take the output of that, and I pass it in to the next call of the reduction. So a plus b equals c, and then I call c plus item number 3 equals d, d plus item number 4 equals e, and so on and so forth. And I continue to cycle all the way through the entire array of items, and I add them all together. In this case, I add them together here. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. Now let's go ahead and print the final value and see what we get. Okay, so if we run this, we can see we've reduced the entire array down to 320. Okay, that's if you added all of these numbers together in this way. You could do all kinds of other stuff with map and reduce. We'll do another tutorial lesson where we dive into that much deeper. But I just wanted to run you through some of the basics of how you would use lambda functions. So if we want to do multi-argument, we do a colon b. There's no parentheses around the arguments here. You do a single argument here. And just remember that this right here is exactly the same thing as if you were to define. We're going to call this add. And we're going to say add of a, b, and we're going to say return a plus b. And that's it. So this right here is equivalent to this lambda function right here without a name. Okay? I hope this makes sense. I hope it helps you understand lambda functions and what they're used for and why you would use them. They don't add any additional functionality to the language. They're just a shorthand abbreviation of defining a function that it has only 2 lines in it. Okay? I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the world of Python. Thank you so much. I'll see you then.